Morning, everyone. We're so excited to be back this week. It has been a really crazy few weeks at the Core Collaborative where both Isaac and I work, and we had some awesome, really thoughtful, awesome times doing what we're going to be actually talking about today.
Yes.
Thinking about how we can be engaging students in this current environment, regardless of what your school's reopen plan is, whether you're using a hybrid model, if you're fully distanced learning, or if there's going to be, some sort of fully online situation, or I guess if you're going back to school. I don't know of any schools that are going back completely in person as of right now. And I know in New York, a lot of things are changing daily. So I'm not really sure what your situation is. We'd be eager to hear what each of you, when you go back to school, if you know what your plans are yet, if you're not going, or did they push the start date back, which I know that they're doing in some places. Welcome. We're so excited to be back. Thank you for your patience in our absence. This sort of started as something we could do when we knew people were really kind of, not trapped, but when most people were isolating in their houses and they didn't, and we were trying to just connect with folks. And I mean, there's a lot of exciting stuff going on too. And Isaac, maybe you can share a little bit of the work that you've been doing to help teachers prepare for the hybrid environments that they're going to be going back into.
Definitely. Yeah, as Starr said, we've been living it and breathing it from the second we get up to when we go down, just like so many of you, and glad to see our friend Matt with us. Never misses a beat and has so many great ideas. But yeah, well, like you said, we can have as similar to our face-to-face experience as possible. And we just got off of a session right before this talking about really the importance of everything we do, any policy we create. Is this leading to, and I'm going to quote our good friend Isaiah on this, but true and equitable access. And so, talking about going gradeless is always an equity conversation, but really we've been working pre-K 8 together as a team and really focusing on what does it mean to be a learner, and why do we learn, and why do we engage? And even as we go, I'm sure we can share a few examples of some stoplight rubrics and things like that. But having fun with it and feeling good about the future for these amazing partners who are doing this great work.
And honestly, if you're watching to these Q&As, you are already thinking with a mindset that focuses like this, or, you've been told that that's what we're going to be doing, and you're trying to wrap your brain around it. And whenever we kind of have to have this shift away from traditional instruction to anything other than traditional instruction, there is definitely some time to wrap your brain around what that's going to look like. And I know that when I was working with my middle school teams, there is sometimes a struggle when standards change, where you have to reimagine the content that you're working with, and what it's going to look like in this new environment is certainly huge. And frankly, I mean, one of the ways that we've been handling that at the Core Collaborative is our virtual curriculum that we're developing with schools. It's called, and I always get the letters and the numbers mixed up, C4 VTL, which is all about virtual learning and still making sure that students have voice and choice in their learning, and that teachers are super clear on what they're presenting and how they're presenting it, and that caregivers and students also know not only how can I be successful on each of these tasks and how does it align to bigger picture goals, but why is this important? As Isaac was just saying, why is the work that we're doing essential? And then giving kids the flexibility to really think about how they're going to do the work. What is the product going to be? What kind of feedback are we going to be giving them? And in this environment, when we remove grades, what becomes most important is the actionable feedback that we provide students with, because that's essentially the differentiated and personalized instruction that they're going to be getting based on their specific needs. So when we look at student work through that lens, we're able to then direct them where they need to be based on what we see them doing and where the gaps are. And if we have students who are further along in the standards progression and we want them to keep moving forward, we could understand what that progression is and start pushing them in that direction. Or if we have some folks who are lagging, we need to think about ways that we can catch them up that honors their dignity and doesn't make them feel like they are behind everybody else, but that they are exactly where they are. And, we never want to make kids feel badly about where they are. We just want to help them keep moving forward. And honestly, what Isaac had said about the equity work at the beginning, and I know we've been discussing this intermittently through our times on this chat, but something that I realized while I was finishing up my last book with ASCD, now it's out with my editor, it's kind of out of my hands. I did so much research for that book. It's probably the first book I've ever written that has literally pages of sourcing at the back of it. I've always really prided myself on writing about things that I'm personally invested in. And I think that when I started doing all of this hacking assessment work, equity was important to me, but that language of equity wasn't really on my radar. And I don't know that I was as intentional as I could have been, but in retrospect now, it's awesome that I get to write another book where I can be really intentional about it and help folks who's been following my work for a long time or new to the work that I do also start being really intentional about the equity work that we do with assessment that really takes into account how students feel about themselves as learners and how we could also embed that in the practices that we use in our classroom to honor their dignity and really create an environment that allows for belonging for every single student in that space. So what do you think, Isaac? I mean, we have a quiet group this morning. I know it's our first day back. Matt is here.
Yeah, and I was just shooting you a quick text to let you know that there are comments popping up on Facebook that are not coming up on Be Live.
I'm
So
not
Matt
seeing
even
anything.
shared something really interesting that they are actually going back face-to-face, but because of where they're based, they have the space that they can do kind of outdoor classrooms and take advantage of things like that. And so it sounds like they have the space to do it. And we've got some good friends on here. We've got Stacy Rappaport that I don't know if you've got to work with face to face, but we go way back with her in the Core Collaborative. And then Janet Steinberg's on, and there's other people popping up, but I've seen messages from them. And Stacy really mentioned, the importance of having something to guide them. And she's saying, feedback guides them to where they're headed. And then Stacy did just add that in New York City, as of now, it's going to be remote and face-to-face. It is that blended approach. And working all over the country, Starr and I have teamed up, and other of our team teamed up. We know that things are changing, as Starr mentioned, day to day. But when we can develop a list of quality tasks and a list of quality lessons and a list of quality rubrics and checklists and things like that we know we can go to, then regardless of the way we interact, we know we've got that focus on what does the standard really mean. We know we've got that focus for the kids of what is the progression, so I can know where I am and how can you help me know where to go next. And so, yeah, I agree that the clarity for virtual teaching and learning and other great things that people are doing right now to say, this is what we expect, this is what proficiency means, here are the steps along that way, then regardless of what happens, we're ready. And the more focused we are, we know just from our own experiences in virtual learning, we've got to take what we need usually and narrow that so we can still go deep, but we can really make it happen.
Yeah, and I think that that's really important too, that when we think about curriculum on a like as what it is right now, if we are starting in a distance space, how are we going to build those relationships, which in Hattie's research in terms of effect sizes, the student-teacher relationship is a huge effect size in order to help kids learn. And in order to be able to get them to buy in and see the value of the work that we're doing, we really need to make sure that we know who our learners are, we know what they're interested in, and we try to bring their interests into class every single day in a way that makes them excited to show up when it's time to show up, and not want to disengage by shutting off their videos, and making sure that expectations are really clear. We have a bunch of I don't want to call them norms. Somebody told me the other day that, when we're thinking about included environments, norms could be, that word in itself, it could be problematic. So we want to make sure that there are very clear expectations about what students are going to be doing to participate in the learning. And if we are going to be having time where we get to have Zoom or Google Meets or whatever you're using with your students to interact for lesson time, it cannot be under any circumstance 20 minutes of lecture. You're just not going to engage students if you're talking at them for all this time, and finding ways to make sure that they get to be a part of the conversation is essential. And, getting them to interact with us is also essential. Isaac, I'm not seeing any comments come up in our chat today. So
I'm going to share some really good ones with you. Yeah. Because you've probably seen me looking down, which means I'm reading off my phone. Yeah, so there's been a few comments around that idea of equity and connection and honoring each other's dignity and humanity. And Andy Jackson shared,
for all this time.
I love the connection between the differentiation. Between differentiation and dignity. And that it's so important that we think about how we support our struggling learners, especially during remote learning, and that no matter where they are, that's where they're supposed to be. And then I love this quote, it's my job to move them forward with dignity and love. And so what a cool way to think about that. So while we focus in on these key academic skills, we're seeing it in that larger picture of their social environment. Matt was sharing too something really interesting, that they've set up this 40 by 100 foot pavilion tent. I'm almost imagining what we were going to have at
Minefield
this year. Yeah, it sounds like just like it, so that they can share space, because we know the power of that connection that comes with sharing space, but also be socially distanced and safe. And then again, Stacy and some others were saying, especially for our younger students, when there are those ways to connect, but then, like you said, virtually we can connect if we make it all about us as educators who are the experts, but learning happens on the side of the student. So then we can build that partnership, honor their dignity, and not talk at them forever, but interact. That's so powerful. And then, of course, people are sharing, ideas they kind of have. So let me be quiet for a minute and let you share what you're thinking after that, and I'll share a few more.
Well, no, I actually pulled it up on my phone too and muted my phone so that I could kind of see what's going on. I feel a little out of the loop, and there is some great conversations going on there. I think that I just saw that Jamie said we're required to teach synchronously for 45 minutes per week. And some of the suggestions I've made about that, because the district we were working in right now is also started, they're going to be doing a hybrid. And it might be useful to live stream your days so that you're not just repeating the in-class lesson that you're doing 2 days in a row. So if you have one group A in your room, and you're live streaming, and when you're live streaming, you're actually recording that lesson that's interacting, and then students who are off that day will have the opportunity to watch that lesson. You could be doing two things at once, because now you're creating a library of your live lessons and you're not stopping. But then they have the rest of the week when they're not there to review what was going on. And if you are doing some kind of menu options where they have more time to complete tasks around whatever you're teaching them, you'll have a little bit more sort of time to go back and forth with the stuff that they're learning. And I think a suggestion I can make, and this video stuff is very new for me. I don't really enjoy seeing myself on video. I don't like the sound of my own voice, so I could really empathize with this idea that, I don't want to record, but there is so much power for the kids to be able to see you, their teacher, and have you engage with them, and then also have opportunities to do small groups that are separate maybe from that synchronous time that you have to be on there. And if you're using Zoom, you could certainly use their breakout room features, and really start tracking student progress that way, as well as maybe starting an office hours that is outside of the synchronous time that you have to be on, but a time that kids know that you'll be live, and that they could come to you different days throughout the week, the same way you would have those extra help periods, either in the morning or in the afternoon, whatever makes sense, or a little bit on both ends, depending on whether you have early risers or late risers in your midst that would benefit from either way. I think it is definitely something that we need to be considering in terms of, how we're helping kids learn in this environment, because they did lose a lot of learning in the spring because we were so reactive to get them into, like everything shut down and a lot of folks weren't really prepared. And now we really need to go out of our way to make sure that we are prepared moving forward. We create really engaging projects or tasks that students could be working on that are very specifically aligned to standards. And also giving them opportunities to speak, write, listen, and read every single day across content areas. So spending time with your colleagues, especially at the secondary level, where you don't control all the different content areas, you only control the one space that you're in, to make sure that what's happening in each of those learning environments sort of work together, so that kids see that cohesion that may not be so evident sometimes.
And you may have noted this. Sometimes I'm really good at listening and typing, and sometimes not. And that was a not time. But Andy Jackson shared a message straight from the kids. That these eighth graders were saying they will like show up because they can be with each other and connect with each other. And so, who better to ask than the learners themselves? And if they're telling us that, then as you've just said, and as all these comments kind of tie together, they have to realize this is about them. It's for them. And there's a great idea shared even about like having a fun, silly icebreaker, or anything you can do to let them know that I see you, I hear you, you have value, and this is going to be fun. It's not going to be, like you said, a 40-minute. Here's Isaac talking to you about something. It's going to be chances for you to break out and connect or share your thinking.
And I mean, if I could add, as somebody who works with teachers now in this environment, and how, when you have an engaged small group, the last group that I worked with this week made such tremendous progress, and they took so much ownership of the work that they were doing, that it made the sessions that we were doing absolutely transformative. And, really taking into consideration the new standards they were working with, how it was going to look for kids, making sure that there was choice on every single learning target, and really just being thoughtful about how they were sharing new content and new skills with students. And as somebody facilitating that, just giving them the space instead of doing it for them. And I think in this format, sometimes it's a little easy for us to just go blah, like kind of vomit all over because we don't necessarily have the interaction that we want or need. And I think that sometimes that discomfort of wait time, which is uncomfortable in person, but it's exceptionally uncomfortable in this format, when you're not sitting in a room and you can't feel what's going on and really understand people's reactions to things. We really have to practice our wait time in this hybrid environment so that kids do have an opportunity to process what we're sharing with them and then give them a chance to sort of internalize what we've said and make it their own as well.
And on that note, I'll be vulnerable for just a minute and share a failure along that, because I've had the pleasure to work with these great people. The last couple of weeks has been like Washington District, Spartanburg District 2, amazing teachers, amazing coaches, amazing admin. And I also get to work with Starr on another shared adventure with our Eastern Central BOCES in Colorado, who've been longtime partners. They're outstanding people. They go so deep with impact teamwork and the formative process. But we had a session just the other day I was really excited about, got all their feedback, put it together. And here's where I failed is I unintentionally really insulted their professionalism and even their dignity, because what I wanted to do was give them so much because they're doing so much. And I was kind of seeing myself as like, okay, I know somebody said they need this, somebody said they need this. So I packed like easily 90 minutes of that 2 hours, not straight, but like showing and sharing, and I created things and all that. And what I was coming from a good place of I want to support them because they're doing so much, and they're just these wonderful educators and their hearts are in the right places. But I realized through that and talking to Starr and our colleagues there, like, okay, what we needed was more time to do this together. I mean, yeah, I'm adding ideas, but it was one of those kind of fake, you have ownership of this. Like, we're going to do this because I planned it. And so for our next session, Starr and I are planning again a little later, but I've really opened it up. And so they didn't actually give me feedback on that, but that was my reflection. And I know it's true. So now we're going to have like, here's an example because you asked for it, but let's jump out of it. What can we do with it? And I'm so excited because I know we're going to end up those couple of hours. Like I've got to end up these sessions over the last few weeks where we have created something that there's no way I could create. And so it's a painful learning experience, as many learning experiences are, but a powerful one for me to take. And for any time I get to work with kids in the classroom this year, I'm really going to try to keep that at the fore. So hopefully you can learn from my mistakes.
Well, I mean, it's funny you should say that, Isaac, because I remember when we were looking at their feedback from the first session, and I was kind of overwhelmed by the contradictory feedback that I had received, and really trying to meet the needs of all the learners in the space. And they're coming from a lot of different places and they're teaching different grade levels. And I'm like, how can I serve this whole population so that they don't feel the 2 hours they're with me is going to be a waste of time? And that's the way I used to think about my classes too. You have 34 students in there and they all have different needs. And although there are certain content things you have to do, you still have to take into account where each child is and what each child needs when you make those choices. So I wanted to do a little modeling, but I also wanted to give them time to make their own choices and practice with whatever they chose. And my second session was so much better, I think, than the first one, because I let them choose if they wanted to be in a breakout session instead of just making everybody do it. I gave them options as to what kind of reading strategies they wanted to plan their lessons around. And I embedded it together. So they had a bunch of resources. And I said to them, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to just scan this document I gave you. make a choice about which one you want to build your lesson around. And then I'm going to give you time to build the lesson using the strategy you decided you wanted to use with the resources that are here. And then at the end, we're going to share all the strategies and just, that you guys all came up with, so that each of you has not only the one that you made, but you have all these options from everybody else also. And it really was very, very well responded to. And now I know moving forward that that's something that's going to be really important to me. I was looking back at the stream for a second, and I noticed something that Matt had said about back channels. And I just want to state that even when I was in classroom with students 5 days a week, when you're in a classroom with 34 high school students, you always have a handful of really assertive students. And then you have your introverts who aren't going to force their way in with those assertive ones. So having back channels in your classroom, having a hit, if you have Twitter, if your students are old enough to use Twitter and you're using a hashtag for your class, and just allowing your introverts to use that back channel during classroom discussions, and then, kind of giving one of the students the responsibility to make sure that all the questions that arise on that back channel get answered in class or get answered after the fact, is another way to get those voices of more introverted students heard. So back channels are really, really important, especially if you have introverted students who are going to struggle with this new idea face-to-face. And what I really love about it, additionally, when you're using a class hashtag on whatever platform you might be using on, you have a real transcript of the learning that was happening in that space, and they could go back to it. So if you drop resources there where you might say things or send emails, there isn't something that's memorialized for them to go back to in context. Whereas when you maintain a back channel, you have contextualized resources and ideas all happening in one space that kids could use later. And that's another form of differentiation as well, because you're really thinking about students who might need more processing time to revisit situations and revisit resources and be really thoughtful about how they use those in their learning regularly.
And Jamie asked, what's your favorite platform? And I just have to say, what a great example as we're all following along with the comments and thoughts. This would be okay if Starr talked and I was here to be her assistant and ask a couple questions, but it's so much richer because the real conversations happening this way and then being kind of broadcast out through Starr's voice.
I mean, I will say it was nice the 1 week that we did set up the classroom. Like we use that, Facebook has those groups, and it was nice to finally be in there with Jamie and Matt, and I think Brian was in there too. There were a bunch of us in there, and it was a really good time to be able to see people's faces and have you all be a part of the conversation. But it definitely was a little awkward, and I'm not going to say that, it was just a very different thing. It wasn't like this Q&A where you asked for me to share my expertise. If I'm sitting in a room full of people, I'm not going to sit there and talk the whole time. That's just not how I function ever. And I love having Isaac on here with me because I don't like talking at myself, even though everybody is, watching and this is useful to you, which is, why I do it. I want you all to feel like your questions are being answered. And if different things arise, I want to be able to do whatever I can to be supportive in the struggles and challenges that you're having. And I also want to be able to celebrate the successes that you're having. Thank you all. Have a great weekend. Thanks for your help, Isaac. I always appreciate it.
I love it. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.